A small alien colony lived far away, on the very edge of known space. For many years, they had tried to build a life there. They grew food, built homes, and tried to make a future for their families. But life on the edge of space was not easy. Supplies from other worlds came slowly, and dangers were always close. The colony had enemies, raiders, rival species, and harsh conditions that could destroy everything in a single moment. Still, the colonists held on with hope, believing they could survive. But then came the dark days. A powerful enemy force discovered their world. Ships appeared in orbit, and the skies filled with fear. The enemy wanted the colony for themselves. They wanted its resources and its location. The colonists tried to fight back, but their defenses were weak. The weapons they had were too few, their shields too old, and their soldiers too untrained for a war of this scale. Every day the enemy pushed harder and the colony grew weaker. The people tried to stay brave. Parents told their children that help would come. Leaders promised that the galaxy would not ignore them, but inside even the bravest hearts were filled with fear. Supplies began to run low. Food became scarce. Medicine started to run out, and the sick were left with little hope. Every family felt the weight of despair. Their once bright colony now felt like a prison, trapped under the watch of enemies who were ready to strike at any moment. The leaders of the colony gathered in their central hall. They spoke in urgent voices, their faces pale with worry. "We cannot survive much longer," one of them said. "If we do nothing, our people will be wiped out." Another leader stood and said, "We must send out a call for help. We must ask the galaxy to hear us." It was a desperate idea, but desperation was all they had left. So with what little power remained in their communication systems, the colony prepared a universal SOS. They coded the message in every known language, broadcasting on every frequency, hoping that someone somewhere would hear their cry. The message was simple: "We are under attack. We cannot survive. Please, anyone who hears this, help us." The signal was sent out into the endless dark of space. It spread like a fragile thread across the stars, reaching farther and farther into the galaxy. The colonists watched the sky and waited. At first, they believed that someone would come quickly. Perhaps the great alliances would respond. Perhaps a nearby world would send aid. But as days passed, there was only silence. The enemy ships still hovered above, sometimes firing to remind the colonists of their helplessness. The ground shook with each attack. Families huddled together in fear. "Has no one heard us?" people asked. "Does no one care?" The leaders had no answer. All they could do was wait and pray. A week passed, then two. The silence from the stars was louder than any attack. No fleet appeared. No allies came. The colonists began to understand a cruel truth. The galaxy had heard them, but no one dared to answer. Their enemies were too strong. Their world was too small, too unimportant. To the great powers of the galaxy, they were not worth the risk. Hope began to fade. Mothers whispered to their children, telling them stories to keep them calm, even though they feared those stories would be the last comfort they could give. Fathers tried to be strong, though their eyes were filled with worry. Old men and women remembered better times when they had believed in unity, in help from others. Now they saw only abandonment. Every day that passed without a response felt like another wound. The people of the colony started to wonder if sending the SOS had been useless. Some even regretted it. "We showed our weakness to the whole galaxy," one farmer said bitterly. "And still, no one comes." The leaders tried to encourage their people, but even they were losing faith. In their private moments, they admitted to each other that the silence was worse than the attacks. Yet despite all this, the SOS continued to travel. The signal moved through distant systems, crossing the vast distances of space. Somewhere far away it might reach ears that would listen. But the colonists could not know this. For them, all they had was silence. As the third week came, many in the colony began to prepare for the worst. Families gathered together, holding each other tightly. Some tried to hide in the forests or caves, hoping to escape the destruction when it came. Others stayed in their homes, unwilling to abandon the lives they had built, even if it meant dying there. The leaders called one last meeting. They stood before the tired, frightened faces of their people and spoke with heavy hearts. "We sent our cry into the stars," one leader said, voice trembling. "But no one has answered. We are alone." The words fell over the crowd like a shadow. No one argued. No one could. And so the colony waited. Every sunrise felt like it might be their last. Children cried quietly in the night. Soldiers who once stood tall now looked broken. The sense of doom hung over everyone like a dark cloud. They had asked for help. They had begged the galaxy to listen, but the stars had given no reply. The people believed it was over. They believed that no one would come. And in that silence, as their hope turned to despair, they prepared themselves for the end. For many days, the colony had waited in silence, believing no one would ever reply to their desperate cry. Their SOS had been sent far across the galaxy, but the emptiness of space gave nothing back. Families had already started preparing for the end, and leaders had lost hope of rescue. Then, when almost all faith was gone, a signal returned. At first, people could not believe it. The communication officers ran through the halls shouting the news, and the colonists gathered in crowded rooms, clinging to the chance that their prayers had been answered. Screens flickered with strange symbols as the message was decoded. For a moment, hearts lifted, thinking perhaps the great alliances or noble empires had come to save them. Maybe the peaceful coalitions would arrive with medicine, food, and soldiers. Maybe the respected powers of the galaxy would show compassion at last. But when the origin of the signal was revealed, silence fell again, this time heavy, sharp, and filled with unease. The signal had not come from any noble empire. It had not come from the advanced coalitions who spoke of peace and harmony. It had not come from the strong protectorates of the inner worlds. It had come from a single place that most colonists never thought would answer. It came from Earth. At once, whispers spread through the crowd. Some people gasped, others stared at the floor, and a few even trembled. The word Earth carried a power unlike any other. Across the galaxy, Earth was known by another name, the Deathworld. It was a planet with storms so fierce they could tear apart mountains, with oceans that could drown entire continents, with creatures that had evolved to kill in order to survive. On Earth, life itself was a battle, and only the strongest survived. The galaxy had always looked at Earth with a strange mix of respect and fear. The colonists knew the stories. Every child had heard them whispered at night. Every adult had read them in records or seen them in broadcasts. Humanity was a race forged in hardship. Their history was filled with war, survival, and relentless struggle. When other species studied Earth, they saw a world so hostile that it should have destroyed its people. Yet humanity had not only endured, it had thrived. They had fought hunger, disease, weather, predators, and each other. They had built machines that touched the stars. They had turned their death world into a home and then carried that spirit of survival into the galaxy. But the galaxy also remembered the cost. Wherever humans went, change followed. Their victories were never gentle. Their battles were fierce and final. When they fought with everything: burning skies, broken ground, and a will that frightened even the strongest empires. Humanity did not surrender, and they did not fight halfway. If humans answered a call, they brought with them both salvation and destruction. And now, the colonists realized, it was humanity who had heard their plea. For many, the first feeling was relief. "Someone has answered," whispered a mother holding her child. "We are not alone." Hope filled their hearts because even though Earth was feared, it was also known that humans never ignored a cry for help. If anyone would come, it would be them, but hope was quickly joined by dread. Others in the room muttered nervously. "Do you know what it means if they come?" one farmer asked, his voice shaking. "The enemy will be destroyed, yes, but so will half our world. Humans do not bring quiet rescue. They bring war." The leaders sat together staring at the decoded signal. The message was simple, clear, and full of certainty. "We received your SOS, we are coming." Those words carried weight far greater than any fleet name or royal seal. Humanity was not like the noble empires who measured every action with politics. They were not like the peaceful coalitions who tried endless discussions before making a move. Humans acted. Once they decided, they moved with a force that could not be stopped. The colony's council debated deep into the night. Some argued they should cancel their call, that perhaps survival under the enemy would be better than survival under the shadow of humanity's war. Others argued that there was no choice. The enemy would kill them all. At least with humans there was a chance to live. And so the council made their decision. They would accept Earth's reply. As the news spread through the colony, emotions clashed. Some people cried with joy, falling to their knees, thanking the stars that their children would live. Others were pale and silent, imagining the fire that would soon fall from the skies. Soldiers sharpened their weapons and prepared defenses. though they knew they could not compare to what humans would bring. Old men and women whispered stories from long ago, when humanity had fought other wars, wars that reshaped entire sectors of space. The colony was now caught between two powerful fears. On one side, the enemy fleet still hovered above, waiting to crush them. On the other, humanity was on its way, Deathworlders who had never been known for mercy. To many colonists, it felt like choosing between fire and ice, between drowning and burning. And yet deep inside, there was also a strange pride. Humanity had not ignored them. While the great empires had turned away, while the peaceful coalitions had remained silent, Earth had answered. The Deathworlders had heard their cry and chosen to come. Even if the cost was terrible, it was better than being forgotten. The waiting began again, but this time the silence felt different. It was no longer the silence of abandonment. It was the silence before a storm. People looked at the sky with both fear and anticipation, knowing that soon it would be filled with the roar of engines, with ships that carried the most dangerous species in the galaxy. For the first time in weeks, the colonists dared to believe they might survive. But they also understood a new truth. Survival would not come gently. Survival would come with fire, steel, and the unstoppable will of the Deathworlders of Earth. The day the humans arrived began like every other dark day in the colony. The enemy still circled above in their great ships, casting shadows over the land below. Families sat huddled in basements, food was nearly gone, and the people had stopped hoping. Even though Earth had sent a message saying they were coming, no one knew if they could really arrive in time. Some even thought it had been a cruel trick of fate, giving them hope only to let it die again. But then the sky changed. At first, it was only a distant hum, a vibration that rippled through the air and made windows tremble. The colonists looked up. Against the pale light of the sun, dark shapes appeared, breaking through the atmosphere. They grew larger and larger until the whole horizon was filled with them. These were not fragile scout ships or small carriers. They were warships, vast, towering machines of steel bristling with weapons and defenses. They were ships made for one purpose only: battle. Children pointed at the sky, their eyes wide. Elders fell silent, their mouths open as they recognized what they were seeing. The Deathworlders had come. The humans did not arrive with words of comfort. They did not open channels to speak or negotiate. There were no long messages about peace, no promises of gentle solutions. Instead, the moment their ships entered orbit, they unleashed fire. The first human missiles cut through the sky like falling stars. The colony shook as explosions lit the heavens. The enemy fleet, which had seemed so strong for so many weeks, was suddenly thrown into chaos. Blinding flashes tore through their formations. Enemy vessels broke apart, flaming wreckage falling into the atmosphere. The humans attacked with speed and precision, every move planned, every strike devastating. From the ground, the colonists watched in awe and terror. The sky became a battlefield streaked with fire and thunder. Human warships moved like predators, fast and merciless. Their weapons did not hesitate, their guns did not stop. Every second, another enemy ship was reduced to scrap. The invaders who had once seemed invincible were now scattering, desperate to escape the storm humanity had brought. The colonists whispered among themselves. "Look at them," one farmer said, clutching his child close. "They fight like no one else in the galaxy." It was true. Where other species held back, humanity pressed forward. Where others calculated and debated, humans acted. Their ships did not retreat even when surrounded. They drove into the heart of the enemy, with a ferocity that stunned even the most seasoned colonist soldiers. The ground itself shook as debris from destroyed ships rained down into the forests and oceans. Fires spread, but no one cared. For the first time in weeks, the enemy was not the master of the skies. For the first time, the colonists felt the weight of fear shift, from themselves to those who had dared to attack them. The enemy tried to fight back. They launched counterattacks, firing energy beams and missiles at the human fleet. But the humans were ready. Shields flared, weapons roared, and counterfire cut down the attackers before they could even regroup. Within minutes, whole squadrons were gone. Where once the colony had seen only the strength of their enemies, now they saw only their destruction. And it was not just the weapons. It was the way the humans fought. They fought as if every life depended on absolute victory. They moved with a cold, relentless determination. Each strike planned to finish the battle as quickly as possible. There was no hesitation, no mercy, no pause. To the colonists, it looked less like a battle and more like a storm of nature itself, a storm no one could resist. Some colonists cheered, their voices rising above the thunder. Others could only stand frozen, caught between hope and fear. This was salvation, but it was also terrifying. To be rescued by humans meant watching war itself unleashed before your eyes. The tide of the conflict turned almost instantly. For weeks, the colony had been under siege, believing there was no escape. In less than an hour of human arrival, the invaders were retreating, their fleet shattered. Explosions filled the sky as the last enemy ships tried to flee into the void, but even then humanity pursued them. The humans did not stop until every enemy craft was destroyed or driven so far that they would never return. On the ground, the colonists felt the silence that followed. For so long they had listened to the constant hum of enemy patrols, the endless thunder of bombardments. Now for the first time there was only quiet. A strange, heavy quiet broken only by the crackle of fires and the sobs of families who could not believe they were still alive. The people stepped out of their hiding places, their eyes on the sky. Above them, the massive human ships still hung in orbit, their dark shapes blocking the stars. They looked like guardians and executioners. The colonists knew they owed their lives to those ships, but they also knew what it meant. Their world had been saved by Deathworlders. The memory of the battle would never leave them. The fire in the skies, the roar of destruction, the way humans had fought without fear or hesitation, it was burned into their minds. Some saw them as saviors, others as a warning. But no one could deny the truth. Humanity had changed everything. The enemy was gone. The colony was alive, and the galaxy, watching from afar, would soon learn what the colonists now understood deeply. When Deathworlders arrived, survival was certain, but survival was never gentle. The battle was over. The sky no longer burned with fire, and the enemy fleet was gone. For the first time in weeks, the colony was free. People stepped out of their hiding places, blinking in the sunlight as if they had been trapped in darkness for years. Children clung to their parents, soldiers lowered their useless rifles, and leaders finally allowed themselves to breathe. They had survived. Humanity had saved them, but survival had come at a price. When the colonists looked around their world, they saw the scars left behind. Forests that had once stretched green and full of life were now burned black. Mountains were split open by falling wreckage. Craters scarred the farmland, and rivers carried ash instead of clear water. Entire towns had been flattened, their houses reduced to rubble beneath the weight of war. The humans had won, but the victory had been brutal, and the land bore witness to it. Families returned to their homes only to find nothing left. Whole streets were gone, swallowed by the shock waves of explosions. Children cried when they saw their schools destroyed. Farmers fell silent when they saw their fields turned into wasteland. The price of being saved was survival, yes, but also loss. For many, it felt like trading one destruction for another. And yet above it all, the human warships still hung in the sky. They were not quiet observers. Their presence was heavy, sharp, and unmistakable. When they spoke through the colony's communication systems, their words were direct and clear. "You are safe," the humans said. "The enemy is gone. But understand this, our protection carries consequences." The colonists listened uneasy. The humans explained that their fleets did not fight with restraint. They fought to end battles quickly and completely. And so, the destruction on the ground had not been an accident. It had been part of the price of victory. "You live," the humans told them, "but the scars of this war will remain. This is the way of survival." Gratitude filled the hearts of many. Mothers held their children close, whispering thanks that they still had a future. Elders wept, knowing their people would not vanish. Leaders bowed their heads to the Deathworlders, admitting that without them, the colony would have been nothing but ashes. Humanity had done what no other species dared. They had answered the SOS. They had fought and they had won. But alongside the gratitude came fear. The colonists could not ignore what they had seen in the skies. The humans fought like no one else, and their power was overwhelming. If such power was ever turned against the colony instead of for it, there would be no hope. For the first time, the colonists truly understood why other empires had remained silent when the SOS was sent. It was not just cowardice. It was caution. To invite Deathworlders into your world was to invite a force as dangerous as the enemy itself. Some people whispered about this fear in private. "We are alive," one farmer said, staring at the ruined land where his crops had once grown. "But is this truly mercy? The humans saved us, yes, but they saved us with fire. If this is what rescue looks like, no wonder others stayed away. His words echoed what many felt, though few dared to say it aloud. In the marketplaces, survivors shared their stories. Some spoke of the moment they saw human ships cutting through the enemy like knives through cloth, and they swore it was the most beautiful sight they had ever seen. Others spoke of the ground shaking under the weight of human weapons, and they said it was like standing at the edge of the world's end. Every story carried the same truth. Humanity had saved them, but humanity had also frightened them. Children played games in the ruins, pretending to be human warships, their voices shouting, "Fire, fire!" as they knocked over rocks and wood. Their laughter was innocent, but their parents watched in silence, uneasy at the thought of their children admiring such destruction. The leaders of the colony met with the humans. They thanked them, bowed deeply, and promised eternal gratitude. But when they returned to their people, their faces were pale. They had seen the humans up close, had looked into the eyes of the Deathworlders. There was no cruelty in those eyes, no joy in destruction, only certainty, only the unshakable belief that survival was worth any cost. It was a belief that both inspired and unsettled. The colony began to rebuild. Families cleared rubble, farmers tried to prepare new fields, and builders began to raise walls again. Yet everywhere they looked, the scars remained. Blackened forests, broken roads, graves where friends and neighbors had fallen, and above them the memory of human ships in the sky lingered like shadows. Some colonists argued with each other. "We should be thankful," one said. "Without them we would all be dead." Another answered, "Yes, but look at our world now. The humans saved us, but they also destroyed what we had. Do we call this victory, or do we call it survival?" The question spread quietly among the people. Victory or survival? Gratitude or fear? Perhaps it was both. Perhaps it would always be both. In time, the colony would heal. New homes would rise, new crops would grow, and new generations would forget the fear of the siege. But they would never forget the day the humans came. They would never forget the roar of battle, the fire in the skies, and the way their world was both saved and scarred by the same hand. The lesson was burned deep into their hearts. Humanity's protection was real, but it was never soft. To call for help from Deathworlders was to invite both salvation and destruction. And as the colony rebuilt, as families tried to find hope again, they carried that truth with them like a shadow. They now understood why others had stayed away. The galaxy feared humanity not because humans were cruel, but because their way of saving could look as terrifying as the threat itself. And yet, when the colony looked at their children playing, when they breathed the air of a world still their own, they also knew this truth. Without the humans, there would have been no tomorrow at all. The story of the colony's rescue did not stay hidden. News travels quickly across the stars, and soon every corner of the galaxy was speaking about what had happened on that small world at the edge of space. Merchants carried whispers from system to system. Soldiers repeated the tale in distant outposts. Politicians debated it in shining halls of power. What began as a desperate cry from a forgotten colony soon became a story that shook the galaxy. The message was simple. When no one else came, Earth did. For some species, this was a story of hope. They had seen too many times how the great empires ignored the weak, how alliances hesitated until it was too late. But humanity had been different. They had not turned away. They had heard the SOS and acted without delay. To these species, Earth became a symbol of salvation, a reminder that someone, somewhere, would always answer. Mothers told their children, "If danger comes, call to the Deathworlders. They will not abandon you." Small colonies lost in the void began to see Earth as a protector more dependable than the mighty empires. To them, humanity was a savior, but not everyone shared this view. Others looked at the same story and saw only danger. Yes, the humans had saved the colony, but at what cost? Entire regions had been destroyed. Cities were left in ruins. The humans fought like storms, and when the storm passed, nothing was the same. Leaders of other species warned their people, "Do not call to Earth unless you are ready to pay the price." Their rescue is not gentle. Their mercy is as sharp as their weapons. Fear spread as quickly as admiration. The galaxy remembered the images. Reporters had captured the human warships blotting out the stars. Survivors told stories of the ground shaking under the fire of human weapons. Those who listened felt both awe and unease. It was impossible to ignore the truth. Humanity's way of saving was tied to destruction. They did not separate the two. Where humans went, victory came, but so did scars. In council chambers across the galaxy, leaders argued about what this meant. Some said humanity was too dangerous, that their intervention in any conflict would bring chaos. Others said that in a galaxy filled with threats, such power was necessary even if it was terrifying. Slowly, a new saying began to spread from world to world. To call Earth is to survive, but to survive as something changed forever. For the rescued colony, there was no doubt in their hearts. They had lived the story themselves. They remembered the silence of waiting, the despair when no other world answered. They remembered the sudden roar of human engines and the fire that tore their enemies apart. They remembered the ruins, the scars, and the fear, but also the fact that they were alive. They had called into the void, and Earth alone had answered. Children of the colony grew up hearing this story. Their parents told them about the days of waiting, the hopeless nights, and the moment the humans came. Some grew up admiring humanity, dreaming of one day joining their fleets. Others grew up fearing them, warning that one should never call for humans unless there was no other choice. Either way, the memory of the SOS was forever etched into their culture. Even the enemies who had once besieged the colony spread the tale. Survivors of their shattered fleets carried warnings back to their own people. Do not fight where humans might hear. They do not come as soldiers. They come as death itself. To them, humanity was not a savior but a nightmare, a force that turned battles into graveyards. And so the story spread in two voices, one of gratitude, one of fear. Both were true. Both became part of humanity's name across the stars. The humans themselves did not try to change the story. They did not defend their methods, nor did they boast about their victory. They simply said, "We answered. We protected the weak. We did what was needed." To them, the scars were part of survival. To others, the scars were proof of danger. The galaxy shifted that day. From then on, whenever a small colony faced trouble, leaders asked themselves a hard question. Should we call for Earth? Should we risk the Deathworlders coming? Some refused, fearing destruction more than defeat. Others sent their signals without hesitation, knowing that no one else would come. The phrase "send a signal to Earth" became both a prayer and a warning. For the rescued colony, the truth was clear and unshakable. They were alive. They had seen both the fire and the salvation of humanity. They had learned that survival had a cost, but it was a cost worth paying. When they looked at the stars, they no longer saw emptiness. They saw a presence out there waiting, listening, a presence called Earth. And across the galaxy, the lesson echoed in every tongue. Calling the Deathworlders meant survival. Always survival. But survival would never come softly. It would come with the thunder of warships, with fire and steel, with scars that could never be forgotten. From that day forward, the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again.